The cold wind howled through the dusty streets of Salt Lake City, Utah Territory, as Fiona Fletcher arrived on the last stagecoach of the evening. Clutching a worn leather satchel to her chest, she stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her emerald eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The year was 1875, and she had traveled over 1,000 miles to escape the whispers that followed her like shadows back in Boston. "Watch yourself, miss," the stagecoach driver warned as he handed down her small trunk. "Strange things happen to strangers in these parts." Fiona nodded politely, though she was no stranger to ominous warnings. She had heard plenty in the 22 years of her life, especially after the incident at the factory. That was precisely why she had come west to start anew where no one knew her name or her past. The last rays of sunlight cast long shadows across the main street as Fiona made her way toward the Salt Lake Hotel. Despite her exhaustion, she couldn't help but notice the curious glances from the locals. Women traveling alone were uncommon enough, but a woman with hair as red as autumn leaves and skin as pale as moonlight drew even more attention. "You'll be wanting a room, I suppose," said the hotel proprietor, a stout woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. $2 a night, meals extra. Fiona counted out the money from her dwindling funds. "I'll take it for 3 nights. I plan to find work and more permanent lodging soon." The woman eyed her suspiciously. "Work, is it? What kind of work does a lady like yourself do?" "I'm a seamstress," Fiona replied, "and I can read and write. I was hoping there might be a position at a shop or perhaps as a teacher's assistant." The proprietor's expression softened slightly. "Well, you might try Donovan's Mercantile. They're looking for someone to help with the ladies' garments. Though I should warn you, Mr. Donovan is particular about who he hires." "Thank you for the information," Fiona said with a grateful smile. Once in her room, Fiona unpacked her few belongings. A worn Bible that had belonged to her mother, 2 simple dresses, a nightgown, and her sewing kit. The journey had depleted most of her savings, and she knew she had to find employment quickly. As she lay in the unfamiliar bed that night, Fiona's thoughts drifted to the life she had left behind. The accident at the textile factory hadn't been her fault, at least not directly. But when the fire broke out moments after she'd argued with the foreman, people started whispering. When 3 workers died in the blaze, the whispers grew louder. And when the foreman's body was found with his throat mysteriously crushed by machinery she had just been standing beside, the whispers became accusations. "Cursed," they had called her. "Bad luck follows that girl like a shadow." Fiona shivered and pulled the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would be the first day of her new life. The morning brought clear skies and the hustle of a busy frontier town. Fiona dressed in her best gown, a modest blue cotton dress with white lace at the collar, and pinned her red hair carefully beneath a matching bonnet. She wanted to make a good impression at Donovan's Mercantile. The shop was larger than she had expected, offering everything from farm equipment to fine fabrics. A bell tinkled as she entered, and a tall, middle-aged man with a trim beard approached. "Good morning, miss. How may I assist you today?" "Good morning," Fiona replied, straightening her shoulders. "I was informed that you might be in need of assistance with ladies' garments. I'm an experienced seamstress." Mr. Donovan studied her for a moment. "Indeed, we have been looking for someone with such skills. Do you have references?" Fiona's heart sank. "I'm afraid not, sir." "I've just arrived from Boston." "Boston?" His eyebrows rose. "That's quite a journey. What brings you all the way to Salt Lake City?" "A fresh start," she said simply, hoping he wouldn't press further. He seemed to consider this. "Very well. I can offer you a trial position. 2 weeks to prove your worth. If your work is satisfactory, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement. Relief flooded through her. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. You won't regret it. For the next week, Fiona worked diligently at the mercantile. Her nimble fingers turned plain fabrics into elegant garments, and her polite manner won over even the most discerning customers. Mr. Donovan seemed pleased, and Fiona began to believe that perhaps she had finally outrun her past. That belief was shattered on Sunday morning. Fiona had decided to attend the local church service, hoping to integrate herself into the community. She sat quietly in the back pew, listening as the Reverend, a stern-faced man named Abraham Wells, delivered his sermon on divine judgment. "The Lord sees all sins," Reverend Wells proclaimed, his voice echoing through the small church. "Even those hidden from mortal eyes cannot escape his judgment." As the congregation filed out after the service, Fiona waited patiently to introduce herself to the Reverend. "Welcome to our community, Miss Fletcher," Reverend Wells said when she approached. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you're new to Salt Lake City." "Yes, Reverend, I arrived just over a week ago," he nodded slowly. "And what brought you to our town?" "I'm seeking new opportunities," she replied, the practiced answer coming easily. "Opportunities," he repeated. "Or perhaps you're running from something." Fiona felt her blood run cold. "I don't understand your meaning, sir." The Reverend lowered his voice. "News travels even from as far as Boston. A factory fire, deaths, strange circumstances." "That was a tragic accident," Fiona said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was it?" His gaze bore into her. "There are those who say otherwise, those who speak of a curse." Fiona took a step back. "I should be going." "Be careful, Miss Fletcher," Reverend Wells called after her as she hurried away. "This is a God-fearing town. We don't take kindly to those who bring darkness with them." By the time Fiona returned to her lodgings, rumors were already swirling through the town. The Reverend had wasted no time sharing his suspicions. When she arrived at Donovan's mercantile the following morning, the atmosphere had changed palpably. "Mr. Donovan would like to speak with you," said Mrs. Donovan, avoiding Fiona's gaze. In the back office, Mr. Donovan sat stiffly behind his desk. "Miss Fletcher, it has come to my attention that there may be certain issues in your past that you failed to disclose." "Mr. Donovan," he held up a hand. "I run a respectable business. My customers trust me. I cannot afford to associate with anyone who might damage that trust." "The stories you've heard are exaggerated," Fiona pleaded. "I've done nothing wrong." "Nevertheless," he continued, "I think it best if we end your employment here. I'll pay you for the week's work." Fiona accepted the coins with trembling hands. "Thank you for the opportunity," she managed to say before leaving the store with as much dignity as she could muster. Word spread quickly in a town like Salt Lake City. By afternoon, Fiona found herself turned away from 3 other establishments where she had hoped to find work. The hotel proprietor informed her that there had been complaints about her presence, and suggested she find other accommodations as soon as possible. Despair settled over Fiona like a heavy cloak as she walked aimlessly through the streets. She had traveled so far, only to find that her past had somehow arrived before her. With her meager savings dwindling and no prospects for employment, she faced an uncertain future. As dusk fell, Fiona found herself at the edge of town near the livery stable. The smell of hay and horses filled the air, and for a moment she considered whether she might be better off continuing westward. California, perhaps, or Oregon, somewhere even further from her past. "You look like you could use a friend," said a deep voice behind her. Fiona turned to find a tall man leading a chestnut mare from the stable. His weathered face was partially hidden beneath the brim of a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see kind eyes studying her with concern. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I was just passing by." "No need to apologize," he replied. "Name's Victor Xander. Most folks around here call me Vic." "Fiona Fletcher," she responded automatically, then immediately regretted giving her real name, if he had heard the rumors. But his expression remained friendly. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Fletcher. You're new to these parts, aren't you?" "Yes, though I'm not sure how much longer I'll be staying." Victor tilted his head slightly. "Trouble finding your footing, something like that," Fiona admitted. He nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Fletcher, I don't mean to pry, but if you're in need of work, my ranch could use an extra pair of hands." Fiona eyed him suspiciously. "What kind of work?" "Nothing improper," he assured her quickly. "My sister runs the household, but she's expecting a child soon and could use help with the cooking and mending. It's not much, but there's a small cabin on the property where you could stay. You'd offer employment to a complete stranger." Victor smiled, and Fiona noticed a dimple in his left cheek. "I like to think I'm a good judge of character, Miss Fletcher, and right now you look like someone who could use a break." Fiona hesitated. The offer was tempting, but she had learned to be cautious. "How do I know I can trust you?" "Fair question," he acknowledged. "Tell you what, come out to the ranch tomorrow. Meet my sister, see the place for yourself. If you're not comfortable, no harm done." After a moment's consideration, Fiona nodded. "I'll consider it. Where is your ranch?" "About 5 miles east of town." "The Lazy X Ranch, you can't miss it." He tipped his hat. "I'll look for you tomorrow, Miss Fletcher." As Victor led his horse away, Fiona wondered if she was making another mistake. But with few options remaining, the cowboy's offer represented a glimmer of hope in an increasingly dire situation. That night, as Fiona prepared for bed in her hotel room, likely for the last time, given the proprietor's clear desire for her departure, a knock came at her door. Cautiously, she opened it to find a young girl of about 14 standing nervously in the hallway. "Are you Miss Fletcher?" the girl asked. "Yes, I am." The girl glanced around before speaking in a hushed tone. "My pa works at the livery. He told me about you talking to Mr. Xander." She thrust a small package wrapped in brown paper into Fiona's hands. "This is from my ma. She says you might need it." Before Fiona could respond, the girl darted away down the hall. Puzzled, Fiona unwrapped the package to find a small loaf of bread, a chunk of cheese, and a note. "Not everyone believes what the Reverend says. Safe journey." The simple act of kindness brought tears to Fiona's eyes. Perhaps there was still goodness to be found, even in a town that had so quickly turned against her. The next morning, Fiona gathered her few possessions and settled her bill at the hotel. The proprietor seemed relieved to see her go, but had the decency to wish her well. With her trunk and satchel in hand, Fiona made her way to the edge of town, where she had arranged to meet Victor. He was waiting as promised, sitting atop his chestnut mare with a wagon hitched to a sturdy mule beside him. "Good morning, Miss Fletcher," he called, tipping his hat. "I'm glad you decided to come." "I'm not committing to anything yet," Fiona clarified as he helped load her belongings onto the wagon. "I'm just coming to see the place." Victor nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Of course. You can ride in the wagon, or if you prefer, I can help you up on Maple here." He patted his horse's neck. "The wagon will be fine, thank you," Fiona replied, climbing onto the wooden seat. As they left Salt Lake City behind, Fiona felt both relief and trepidation. The open landscape of the Utah Territory stretched before them, sagebrush plains giving way to distant mountains, the morning sun casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. "So, Miss Fletcher," Victor said as he guided the mule along the dirt road, "what brings a Boston lady all the way out to this corner of the world?" Fiona tensed. "News travels fast." "Small towns," he said with a shrug. "Everyone knows everyone's business, or thinks they do." "And what business of mine do you think you know?" she asked cautiously. Victor glanced at her, his eyes serious beneath the brim of his hat. "I know Reverend Wells has been spreading tales about you, something about a curse and a factory fire back east." Fiona stared straight ahead, her hands clenched in her lap. "And you're still willing to offer me work?" "I don't put much stock in curses," he replied. "Or in Reverend Wells, for that matter. Man sees the devil's work in every shadow." "The fire was real," Fiona said quietly. "People died." Victor was silent for a moment. "Were you responsible?" "No," she answered firmly, "but I was there. And strange things happened around me even before that, things I can't explain." To her surprise, Victor nodded thoughtfully rather than recoiling. "My grandmother was like that, Cherokee woman. Folks said she could heal with her hands or bring drought with her anger. Some called it a curse, others a gift." "And what do you call it?" He looked at her directly then, and Fiona felt as though he could see straight through to her soul. "I call it a mystery. Worlds full of them." "Doesn't make you cursed." They traveled in comfortable silence for a while after that. The road wound through increasingly varied terrain, patches of cottonwoods and aspens breaking up the arid landscape, small streams cutting across their path. Finally, they crested a hill, and Victor pointed ahead. "There it is, the Lazy X." The ranch spread across a verdant valley, nestled against the foothills of a mountain range. A modest but well-maintained house stood surrounded by several outbuildings, pastures filled with cattle stretching beyond. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a haven carved from the wilderness. As they approached the main house, a pregnant woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. She waved as they drew closer. "That's my sister, Hannah," Victor explained. "Her husband passed last winter pneumonia. She's been helping me run the place since." "I'm sorry for her loss," Fiona said sincerely. Victor guided the wagon to a stop near the house. "Hannah, this is Miss Fiona Fletcher, the lady I mentioned." Hannah Xander was a few years older than Fiona, with the same kind eyes as her brother. "Welcome to the Lazy X, Miss Fletcher. Victor says you might be able to help around the house." "I'm a good cook and an excellent seamstress," Fiona offered. "Though I should warn you, I don't have much experience with ranch life." Hannah smiled warmly. "We all start somewhere. Come inside for some coffee and we can discuss the details." The interior of the house was modest but comfortable, polished wood floors, simple furniture, and windows that allowed in plenty of natural light. Hannah led them to a kitchen that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. "Victor said you might need a place to stay as well." Hannah asked as she poured 3 cups of coffee. Fiona nodded. "If it's not too much trouble." "Not at all. There's a small cabin about 100 yards from the main house. It's where our ranch hand stayed before he moved on to California. It's simple, but it's clean and private." "That sounds perfect," Fiona said, relief evident in her voice. They discussed duties and compensation. Fiona would help with cooking, cleaning, and mending in exchange for room, board, and a small wage. The arrangement seemed fair, and by the time they finished their coffee, Fiona had decided to accept the offer. "I should warn you," she said as Hannah showed her to the cabin later that afternoon. "There are rumors about me in town. The Reverend believes I'm cursed." Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Reverend Wells would find sin in a Sunday school picnic. Victor told me about the gossip." She placed a reassuring hand on Fiona's arm. "We don't judge people based on rumors here." The cabin was indeed small, just one room with a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and a chest of drawers. But it was clean and cozy, with a window that overlooked a meadow dotted with wildflowers. "It's perfect," Fiona said, feeling truly hopeful for the first time since arriving in Utah. Hannah smiled. "Get settled in. Dinner's at 6 in the main house." Left alone, Fiona unpacked her few belongings and sat on the edge of the bed. The peace of this place was palpable, so different from the noise and chaos of Boston or the suspicious glances of Salt Lake City. Perhaps here, miles from town and surrounded by the vast landscape, she could finally find the fresh start she sought. That evening, dinner proved to be a simple but delicious affair: roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. Victor regaled them with tales of his cattle and the characters he'd encountered during his years as a rancher. Hannah spoke of her plans for the baby due in 2 months. The conversation flowed easily, and Fiona found herself relaxing in their company. "So, Miss Fletcher," Victor said as Hannah served apple pie for dessert, "what made you choose Salt Lake City of all places to start anew?" Fiona considered her answer carefully. "I heard it was a place of new beginnings. The frontier always represents opportunity, doesn't it?" "That it does," Victor agreed, "though opportunity often comes with its share of hardships." "I'm no stranger to hardship," Fiona replied. Victor's expression softened. "No, I don't imagine you are." After dinner, as Fiona prepared to return to her cabin for the night, Victor walked her outside. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the ranch, and stars glittered in the vast expanse of the Utah sky. "I want to thank you," Fiona said as they paused outside the main house. "Not many people would offer a position to someone with my reputation." "Reputations are often built on misunderstandings," Victor replied. "I prefer to make my own judgments about people." "And what judgment have you made about me, Mr. Xander?" He studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I think you're someone who's seen her share of trouble. Someone who's been blamed for things beyond her control. But mostly, I think you're someone who deserves a chance." His words touched something deep within her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Sleep well, Miss Fletcher," he said, tipping his hat before turning back toward the house. The following days fell into a comfortable routine. Fiona rose early each morning to help Hannah prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, 4 men who lived in a bunkhouse near the barn. She spent her days assisting with household chores, mending clothes, and preparing meals. In the evenings, she often sat on the porch of her cabin, watching as the sun set behind the mountains. Victor was frequently busy with the cattle or making improvements to the ranch, but he always made time to check on her. Sometimes he brought her wildflowers he'd picked while riding the range. Other times, he simply stopped by to chat. Fiona found herself looking forward to these encounters, drawn to his quiet strength and easy manner. 2 weeks after her arrival at the Lazy X, Fiona was hanging laundry on the line behind the main house when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she saw 3 men riding toward the ranch, one of whom she recognized immediately as Reverend Wells. Heart pounding, Fiona ducked around the side of the house just as Victor emerged from the barn to greet the visitors. "Reverend Wells," she heard him say, his tone cool but polite. "What brings you out this way, Mr. Xander?" the Reverend replied. "I've come on a matter of community concern. It has come to my attention that you've taken in the Fletcher woman." "Miss Fletcher is employed here, yes," Victor confirmed. "What of it?" "I feel it's my duty to warn you of the danger she represents," the Reverend continued. "This woman brings misfortune wherever she goes." Back in Boston, her presence at a factory led to a devastating fire that claimed multiple lives. "Is that so?" Victor's voice remained level. "And was she charged with any crime related to this fire?" The Reverend hesitated. "Well, no, but then I fail to see how it's any of our concern," Victor interrupted. "Miss Fletcher is a hard worker and has been nothing but a blessing to this household, especially with my sister's condition." "You don't understand," the Reverend insisted. "This isn't about legal matters. There's something unnatural about her. People who get close to her suffer misfortune." "She's cursed, Mr. Xander." From her hiding place, Fiona held her breath, waiting for Victor's response. "Reverend," he said finally, "I respect your position in the community, but I'll thank you not to spread such superstitious nonsense on my property. Miss Fletcher stays as long as she wishes to." "You're making a grave mistake," the Reverend warned. "When tragedy befalls this ranch, and it will remember that I tried to warn you." "Good day, Reverend," Victor said firmly. "I believe you know the way back to town." Fiona remained hidden until she heard the sound of the Reverend's party departing. When she finally emerged, she found Victor standing alone, watching as the three riders disappeared down the road. "You heard all that, I assume," he said without turning. "Yes," she admitted, moving to stand beside him. "Perhaps the Reverend is right. Perhaps I should leave before I bring misfortune to you and Hannah." Victor turned to face her then, his expression serious. "Do you believe you're cursed, Fiona?" It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent an unexpected warmth through her. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said honestly. "Strange things have happened around me, the fire at the factory. It started right after I argued with the foreman. And before that, there were other incidents: a neighbor's barn collapsing after he accused me of stealing, a bully at school who fell ill after tormenting me." "Coincidences," Victor suggested. "Perhaps," Fiona conceded. "But so many of them." Victor was quiet for a moment, considering. "My grandmother, the Cherokee woman I told you about, she believed that some people are born with a connection to forces beyond our understanding. Not a curse, but a gift that needs to be acknowledged and respected." "What if it's neither a curse nor a gift?" Fiona asked. "What if it's simply something wrong with me?" "There's nothing wrong with you," Victor said with such conviction that Fiona almost believed him. "The Reverend sees curses because that's what his narrow view of the world allows him to see. I see a strong, capable woman who's faced more than her fair share of hardship." His words touched something deep within her, a longing to be understood and accepted. "Thank you for defending me," she said softly. "I meant what I said," he replied. "You've been nothing but a blessing to this ranch. Hannah adores you, and the men haven't eaten this well in years." Fiona smiled despite herself. "Is that all I am? A good cook?" Victor's expression softened, and Fiona became acutely aware of how close they were standing. "No," he said quietly. "That's not all you are." For a moment, Fiona thought he might say more, might even reach for her hand. But the moment passed when one of the ranch hands called for him from the corral. "We'll talk more later," Victor promised before heading toward the waiting cowboy. That night, Fiona lay awake in her cabin, replaying the day's events. The Reverend's warnings had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. What if he was right? What if her presence here did bring misfortune to the lazy ex, to Victor and Hannah, who had shown her nothing but kindness? Yet Victor's words had also touched her deeply. No one had ever defended her so staunchly before, or suggested that what others called a curse might be something else entirely. And the way he had looked at her, with such warmth and understanding, had stirred feelings she had long since buried. Outside, a summer storm had blown in, wind rattling the windows of her cabin and rain drumming on the roof. Fiona had always found comfort in storms, perhaps, because they were one force of nature more powerful and unpredictable than whatever resided within her. A sudden crack of thunder shook the cabin, followed by a sound that didn't belong, a panicked whinny from the direction of the stable. Fiona sat up, listening intently. Another desperate cry from a horse, then shouting. Pulling on her boots and wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, Fiona hurried outside into the driving rain. Through the darkness and downpour, she could see figures running toward the stable, where an orange glow illuminated the windows. Fire. Fear gripped her heart as Fiona ran toward the stable. By the time she reached it, Victor and two of his ranch hands were leading frightened horses out into the rain while another man fought the blaze with buckets of water. "What happened?" she called over the storm. "Lightning strike." Victor shouted back, guiding a panicked stallion to safety. The hay in the loft caught fire. Without hesitation, Fiona joined the bucket line, passing water from the well to the men fighting the fire. The rain helped, but the blaze had taken hold in the dry hay, and the wooden structure of the stable was vulnerable. For what seemed like hours, they battled the flames. Fiona's arms ached from lifting buckets, and her clothes were soaked through, but she worked alongside the others without complaint. Finally, the combination of their efforts and the relentless rain prevailed, leaving the stable damaged but standing. As dawn broke, revealing a clear sky after the storm, Fiona surveyed the aftermath. The stable roof had partially collapsed, and one wall was badly charred, but the structure could be repaired. Miraculously, all the horses had been saved. "You were a godsend tonight," Victor said, appearing beside her with a blanket which he draped around her shoulders. His face was streaked with soot, his clothes as drenched as hers. Most people would have stayed in their cabins during such a storm. "I heard the horses," she explained simply. "And because of that, we didn't lose a single one." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "So much for the Reverend's curse, eh? If anything, your presence here saved us from what could have been a much greater disaster." Fiona wanted to believe him, but doubt still nagged at her. "The lightning struck just after he warned you about me." Victor shook his head. "Lightning strikes during storms, Fiona. That's not a curse, that's nature." She managed a small smile. "I suppose you're right. Come on," he said, guiding her toward the main house. "Let's get you dry and fed. It's going to be a long day rebuilding that stable." The next week was indeed filled with hard work as everyone on the ranch contributed to repairing the damaged stable. Fiona helped where she could, cooking hearty meals for the workers, bringing water to the men as they labored under the summer sun, and even learning to handle a hammer and nails under Victor's patient instruction. Throughout it all, she found herself drawing closer to him. There was something about Victor Xander that made her feel safe, and accepted, something she hadn't experienced since before her mother's death years ago. He never treated her like she was different or dangerous, never flinched when strange coincidences occurred, like the time a tool he needed suddenly appeared at his feet just as he mentioned needing it. One evening, as the repaired stable neared completion, Fiona found Victor sitting alone on a fallen log near the creek that ran through the property. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, and for a moment she simply watched him, his strong profile, the way his hands moved as he whittled a small piece of wood. "May I join you?" she asked, approaching. He looked up with a smile that made her heart skip. "Always." Fiona sat beside him, careful to maintain a proper distance. "What are you making?" Victor held up the small wooden figure, a horse, delicately carved despite being no larger than his palm. "For Hannah's baby. I'm making a whole farm's worth of animals." "It's beautiful," Fiona said, genuinely impressed. "You're quite talented." "My father taught me," he explained. "Said every man should know how to create something beautiful with his hands." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Victor nodded. "He was. Came out here with nothing but a dream and built this ranch from the ground up. Taught me everything I know about cattle, horses, and treating people right." "He must be proud of what you've accomplished," Fiona said. "He passed 5 years ago," Victor replied, his voice softening with memory. "But I like to think he'd approve of how I've kept things going." "I'm sure he would," Fiona said gently. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the creek water caught the last rays of sunlight, transforming into a ribbon of gold winding through the property. "You know," Victor said eventually, "in the 3 weeks you've been here, I haven't seen a single sign of this supposed curse the Reverend is so concerned about. The stable fire was a lightning strike during the worst storm of the season," he interrupted firmly. "And thanks to you hearing the horses, we saved every animal and most of the structure." Fiona sighed. "Back in Boston, there were so many incidents. The factory fire was just the last in a long line of strange occurrences." "Tell me about them," Victor encouraged. "Not the rumors, but what actually happened." For the first time, Fiona found herself wanting to share the full truth with someone. "It started when I was a child. My mother noticed at first how objects would sometimes move when I was upset or afraid. How plants would grow unusually fast in our garden where I played. She called it my gift and taught me to control my emotions, to stay calm even when provoked." "That sounds like wisdom, not superstition," Victor observed. "She protected me from those who might not understand," Fiona continued. "But after she died when I was 16, I was on my own. I took work at the textile factory, kept to myself, tried to stay unnoticed. But the foreman—" She trailed off, the memory still painful. "What about the foreman?" Victor prompted gently. "He took an interest in me that wasn't appropriate," Fiona said, choosing her words carefully. "When I rejected his advances, he became cruel, assigned me the worst tasks, docked my pay for invented infractions. The day of the fire, he cornered me in the storeroom." She swallowed hard. "I was frightened, angry. The lantern on the wall started swinging, though there was no breeze. It fell, broke, and the fire spread so quickly." Victor's expression darkened. "So the fire was an accident caused by the foreman's own misconduct." "Yes, but the way he died." Fiona shuddered. "He was trying to escape when a massive iron machine somehow toppled over, crushed him. No one could explain how it happened. The machine had been bolted to the floor. And people blamed you," Victor concluded. Fiona nodded. "They said I'd cursed him, cursed the factory. 3 other workers died in that fire, and their families wanted someone to blame. It became impossible to stay." Victor was quiet for a long moment, processing what she'd shared. Finally, he reached over and took her hand in a gesture so unexpected that Fiona nearly pulled away in surprise. "What others call a curse, I call remarkable," he said, his voice low and earnest. "You have a connection to forces most people never experience. That doesn't make you dangerous, Fiona. It makes you special." His words and the gentle pressure of his hand on hers brought tears to Fiona's eyes. "You truly believe that?" "With all my heart," he replied. "From the moment I saw you standing alone at the edge of town, looking lost but determined, I knew there was something extraordinary about you. Not something to fear, but something to cherish." The intensity in his gaze made Fiona's breath catch. No one had ever looked at her that way before, like she was precious rather than perilous. "Victor," she began, unsure what she wanted to say. "You don't have to run anymore," he said softly. "Not from me, not from this place. Whatever this power is that you have, it's part of who you are, and I." He hesitated, then continued with quiet conviction. "I find myself caring deeply for who you are, Fiona Fletcher." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Fiona felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble, a fear giving way to hope. "I care for you too," she whispered, the words both frightening and liberating. "But I'm afraid of what might happen. Everyone I've ever been close to has suffered in some way." Victor squeezed her hand. "I'm not everyone, Fiona, and I've never been one to let fear dictate my choices." As if to prove his point, he leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But Fiona didn't move, drawn by a force as mysterious and powerful as the one that had shaped her life. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she felt a surge of emotion so intense that the nearby creek water rippled in response. Victor noticed, breaking the kiss to glance at the water with a look of wonder rather than fear. "See," he said with a smile. "Beautiful, not dangerous." Fiona laughed, a sound of surprise and joy. For the first time in her memory, someone had witnessed her power and responded with awe instead of horror. As they walked back to the ranch hand in hand, Fiona felt lighter than she had in years. Perhaps Victor was right, perhaps what she carried wasn't a curse, but a gift that needed understanding and acceptance. Their newfound connection deepened over the following weeks. During the day, they maintained a professional relationship, with Fiona focusing on her duties helping Hannah prepare for the baby's arrival. But in the evenings, they often walked together along the creek or sat on the porch of Fiona's cabin, talking until the stars filled the sky. Victor shared stories of his childhood on the ranch, of his dreams to expand the Lazy X into the most prosperous cattle operation in the territory. Fiona spoke of her mother, of the small joys they had shared before her passing, and of her own aspirations to someday have a home and family to call her own. As August gave way to September, Hannah's time drew near. The baby was due any day, and Fiona had prepared the nursery in the main house with loving care, sewing blankets, curtains, and tiny garments for the expected arrival. One warm afternoon, as Fiona was gathering eggs from the henhouse, she heard Hannah's cry from the main house. Dropping her basket, she ran toward the sound, finding Hannah doubled over in the kitchen, clutching her swollen belly. "The baby," Hannah gasped. "It's coming, too fast." "Victor," Fiona called out the door. "Victor, the baby's coming." But Victor and most of the ranch hands had ridden out that morning to the far pasture to check on a sick cow. They wouldn't be back until evening. "All right," Fiona said, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Let's get you to bed, I'll help you." "Have you ever delivered a baby before?" Hannah asked, her face pale with fear and pain. "No," Fiona admitted as she helped the pregnant woman toward her bedroom. "But my mother was a midwife. I assisted her many times. I know what to do." This wasn't entirely true. Fiona had only observed from a distance, as her mother attended births, but she couldn't let Hannah see her uncertainty. The nearest doctor was in Salt Lake City, too far to reach in time, and the only ranch hand remaining was young Billy, barely 18 and completely unsuited to the task at hand. "Billy," Fiona called as she settled Hannah on the bed, "ride to town and fetch the doctor. Tell him Hannah's baby is coming early and fast." As the young man galloped away, Fiona turned her full attention to Hannah. The labor progressed rapidly, too rapidly. Within an hour, Hannah was fully dilated and ready to push, her face flushed and damp with sweat. "Something's wrong," Hannah whispered between contractions. "It shouldn't hurt this much." Fear gripped Fiona's heart. She could see that the labor wasn't proceeding normally. The baby seemed to be in an awkward position, and Hannah was bleeding more than she should be. "Hannah, listen to me," Fiona said firmly. "You're going to be all right, both of you. I won't let anything happen to you." As Hannah began to push, Fiona silently prayed for help. She needed more than knowledge now. She needed the power that had so often manifested in moments of intense emotion. Placing her hands on Hannah's distended abdomen, Fiona closed her eyes and concentrated. She visualized the baby turning, moving into the proper position for birth. She imagined Hannah's pain subsiding, her strength returning. And somewhere deep within her, Fiona felt a familiar stirring, the power that had been her burden for so long now answering her deliberate call. A warm sensation flowed through her hands into Hannah's body. The laboring woman gasped, not in pain but in surprise. "What did you do?" "The pain, it's different now," Keep pushing, Fiona encouraged, maintaining her focus. The baby's coming. Minutes later, a healthy cry filled the room as Fiona lifted a perfect baby boy into her arms. Hannah reached for her son, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You saved us," she whispered as Fiona placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "I felt it whatever you did. You saved us both." "I just helped nature take its course," Fiona replied softly, though she knew it had been much more than that. For the first time in her life, she had consciously directed her mysterious ability toward healing rather than harm. When Victor returned that evening, racing into the house after spotting the doctor's buggy outside, he found Hannah resting peacefully with her son cradled in her arms. "A nephew," he breathed, his eyes wide with wonder as he approached the bed. "He's perfect, Hannah." "Thanks to Fiona," Hannah said, smiling at the red-haired woman standing quietly by the window. "She did something remarkable, Victor, something I can't explain." Victor's gaze shifted to Fiona, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Did she now?" The doctor, who had arrived shortly after the birth, cleared his throat. "Whatever Miss Fletcher did, it was masterfully done. I've rarely seen such a clean delivery, especially in a case that by all accounts should have been troubled." After the doctor departed, promising to return in a few days to check on mother and child, Victor found Fiona sitting alone on the front porch, gazing at the stars. "Hannah told me what happened," he said, settling beside her on the porch swing. "She says you healed her with your touch, turned the baby when it was positioned wrong." Fiona nodded slowly. "I didn't know if I could do it. I've never tried to control it like that before, to direct it toward helping rather than whatever happened in the past." Victor took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I told you it was a gift, not a curse." "Perhaps you were right," Fiona conceded, leaning against his shoulder. "Today, it felt like a blessing being able to help Hannah and the baby." "You're the blessing, Fiona," Victor said softly. "The preacher said you were cursed, but I knew from the moment I saw you that you were a blessing sent straight to me." The words warmed her heart, and Fiona turned to face him, emboldened by the day's events and the feeling of rightness that had settled over her since coming to the Lazy X. "I love you, Victor Xander," she said simply. "I think I have since that first day when you offered me a chance when no one else would." Victor's face lit up with joy. "And I love you, Fiona Fletcher, more than I thought possible." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a ring fashioned from silver with a single small sapphire. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. This belongs to you if you'll have it, and me." Fiona gasped at the unexpected proposal. "Are you certain, after everything you know about me?" "Because of everything I know about you," he corrected gently. "Your strength, your kindness, your remarkable spirit. Will you marry me, Fiona? Make the Lazy X your home permanently." Tears of happiness welled in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." As Victor slipped the ring onto her finger, a shower of stars streaked across the night sky, a meteor shower so sudden and beautiful that they both looked up in wonder. "You're doing?" Victor asked with a smile. Fiona laughed. "I don't think even I could arrange that." "Either way," he said, drawing her close, "I'll take it as a sign of approval from the heavens." News of their engagement spread quickly, as did the story of Fiona's miraculous assistance during Hannah's difficult delivery. Attitudes in Salt Lake City began to shift, with many who had shunned her now reconsidering their judgment. The young girl who had brought her bread and cheese that night at the hotel came with her mother to offer congratulations and a handmade quilt as an engagement gift. Even Mr. Donovan from the Mercantile made the journey to the Lazy X to apologize for his hasty dismissal and offer Fiona the opportunity to sell her fine needlework in his shop. Only Reverend Wells remained steadfast in his condemnation, warning his congregation against the witch of the Lazy X, as he called her. But his words carried less weight now, as stories of Fiona's healing touch spread throughout the community. Victor and Fiona were married on a crisp October day, with Hannah standing as witness and her infant son, named Joseph after his late father, sleeping peacefully in a basket nearby. The ceremony was small but joyful, held beneath the golden aspens on the ranch property. Even the town judge who performed the ceremony commented on the unusual warmth of the autumn day, as if nature itself approved of the union. That night, as Fiona and Victor stood on the porch of what was now their home, Victor having insisted that Hannah and the baby keep the main house while he moved into Fiona's cabin, which they planned to expand, they watched as the full moon rose over the mountains. "Happy?" Victor asked, his arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "More than I ever thought possible," Fiona replied honestly. "For so long I believed I was destined to be alone, that my difference would keep me isolated forever." "You were never meant to be alone," Victor said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You were meant to find your way here, to bring your remarkable spirit to this land and to me." As winter settled over the Lazy X ranch, Fiona embraced her new life with joy and purpose. She continued to assist Hannah with baby Joseph, helped manage the household affairs of the growing ranch, and even began to develop a reputation as a healer. Women from neighboring homesteads would occasionally appear at the ranch, seeking her help with difficult pregnancies or sickly children. And while Fiona never claimed any special abilities, she found that her touch often brought comfort and, sometimes, unexpected recovery. Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, wildflowers in the meadows, and the news that Fiona herself was expecting. Victor's joy knew no bounds, and he set about expanding their cabin into a proper house with room for their growing family. By the time their daughter, Margaret, was born in the early winter of 1876, the Lazy X had prospered beyond even Victor's ambitious dreams. His careful management and Fiona's unexpected talent for keeping the cattle healthy, something she attributed to simple observation, but Victor knew involved her special connection to living things, had made their ranch one of the most successful in the territory. And as for Reverend Wells, his influence waned as the community embraced the evidence of their own eyes rather than superstitious fears. When he eventually left Salt Lake City for a position back east, few mourned his departure. 10 years later, the Lazy X Ranch sprawled across twice its original acreage. The main house had been expanded to accommodate Hannah, who had remarried a kind widower from a neighboring ranch, and her growing family. Victor and Fiona's home stood nearby, filled with the laughter of their 3 children, Margaret, now 9, Victor Jr., 7, and little Elizabeth, just 3. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Victor took Fiona for a ride to the creek where he had first kissed her. The aspens had grown taller, the creek ran just as clear, but much else had changed. "You ever regret it?" Fiona asked as they sat side by side on the same fallen log where they had once sat as newly acquainted friends, taking a chance on the cursed woman from Boston. Victor laughed, the sound warm in the autumn air. "That's like asking if I regret the sunrise or the changing seasons. You were never cursed, Fiona. You were exactly who you were meant to be, extraordinary in ways that frightened ordinary minds." "And you were never ordinary," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Not many men would see a woman suspected of witchcraft and think, 'There's my future wife.'" "I didn't see a witch," Victor said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I saw a woman with fire in her hair and strength in her spirit, standing alone against a world that didn't understand her. And I thought, There's a blessing sent straight to me." As if in response to his words, the water in the creek rippled in a perfect circular pattern, though there was no breeze to disturb it. After 10 years of marriage, Fiona had learned not to hide her abilities from Victor or their children, who had inherited varying degrees of her gift. Margaret could make flowers bloom by singing to them. Victor Jr. had an uncanny connection with animals, and little Elizabeth could sometimes predict rain a full day before the clouds appeared. "Our family is going to change this territory," Victor predicted, watching the ripples spread across the water. "Not just with cattle and land, but with the gifts you've brought to the Lazy X." "Our gifts," Fiona corrected gently, "for you gave me the greatest gift of all acceptance, love. A place to belong." As the sun began to set, painting the Utah sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Victor and Fiona walked hand in hand back toward their home. In the distance, they could see their children playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "The preacher said you were cursed," Victor mused, "but I always knew you were a blessing." Fiona smiled, her heart full. "And in finding you, I found my own blessing, a love strong enough to turn a curse into a gift." In the years that followed, the legend of Fiona Xander spread throughout the Utah Territory, and beyond tales of the red-haired healer with the mysterious touch, the woman who could make crops grow in poor soil and heal ailments that baffled doctors. But to those who knew her best, her husband, their children, and the community that had ultimately embraced her, she was simply Fiona, whose remarkable spirit had transformed a lonely ranch into a haven of acceptance and love. And whenever newcomers to the area heard whispers about the Witch of the Lazy X, Victor would smile and correct them gently. "Not a witch," he would say. "A blessing, the greatest blessing this land and I have ever known."